This episode of the Roundhouse podcast is dedicated to my late grandmother, Ann Weiss. She lived to the age of 96 and had quite a good life. I really appreciate how supportive she was of me throughout the years, how she was always interested in what I was doing, what I was up to, and that's remained true for as long as I've known her. I'm very lucky to have had such a great relationship with her. Given that she lived in New England and had a fondness for it, it seems only fitting that this episode be dedicated to her. Today on the Roundhouse, we are learning more about the famous Maine two-footers. All aboard!
In days past, the Roundhouse was where the railroad worker united with the steam locomotive, each to prepare for the journey ahead. Today, it's where we examine the history, the industry, the machines, the hobby, and the passion behind railroading. News, interviews, stories, and more. So climb aboard. This is The Roundhouse.
Welcome to the Roundhouse. I'm your host, Nick Ozerak, and this is episode number 136 of our Trains and Railroading podcast, where we're talking about everything in the industry and the hobby. You name it, and we discuss it. Today, we're talking to the leadership team at Maine Narrow Gauge Railroad and Museum in Portland, Maine, one of the caretakers of Maine two-foot narrow gauge history. They operate trips along the Portland waterfront. It's a very interesting and unique operation. We get to talk to them about the history of what they've been doing and how they continue to preserve these artifacts. Before we get to that, though, the Roundhouse is a Streamliner Media presentation. If you have needs specific to video or digital media communications, be sure to reach out to me at streamlinermedia.com. You can see some of my videos there. I want to thank those of you who are supporting the podcast on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/theroundhouse. For as little as $1 a month, you are going a long way to supporting the show. Trent Weiss, for example, just signed up as a historian. So thank you, Trent, for joining. And those of you who are already supporting, thank you very much. I'd also like to thank the sponsors of today's episode. First, the Strasburg Railroad. Learn more about how their mechanical services department can help with your restoration project by emailing mechanical@strasburgrailroad.com. And Rail and Road Auctions, which specializes in railroad collectibles and memorabilia. You can see what auctions they have coming up at bidrar.com. Our guests today are part of the leadership team of the Maine Narrow Gauge Railroad Company and Museum located in Portland. Please welcome to the Roundhouse Executive Director Griffin Bourassa, General Manager Matt Levy, and Development Specialist Elizabeth Hanson.
Hello.
Thanks for having us.
Great to have you guys on the show because I love me some Maine two-foot gauge, and I love going up to Portland, not just for the lobster, but for that two-foot experience. And having had the opportunity to see your operation, I'm really excited to talk about it. So, Griffin and Matt, I'm wondering if you could provide us an overview of your organization and operation for folks who might not be familiar with it.
Sure. Maine Narrow Gauge, for folks who haven't visited, runs in a pretty unique environment. Our station is right in downtown Portland on the waterfront. At any point on our train ride, you're never more than about 50 feet from the ocean. The only thing separating us from the rocky shoreline is a rail trail. It's about 1.5 miles long end to end. Our daily train rides are 40-minute round trip, which has a historical narration to help kind of bring people into the experience and get people exposed to the history of railroads and the two-footers. One thing that I think is particularly unique with Maine Narrow Gauge is with the downtown location, it creates a great opportunity to get people interested in trains and the railroad museums that may not necessarily come across it elsewhere. I think at a lot of other operations that I'm very fond of, don't get me wrong, it is your destination. You very rarely stumble across a steam engine on the sidewalk ready to go. But in downtown Portland, you certainly could. So I think that's the big stuff. I don't know, Matt, if you'd like to add anything.
Certainly. I think what we do is a very special operation. Narrow gauge itself is pretty unusual in the United States, and the 2-foot narrow gauge is exceptionally unusual. So we are very proud to kind of be the stewards of this pretty unique piece of Maine history, and we get to kind of share our enthusiasm with what we do with visitors from all over the world who this might be the very first train ride they've ever been on, or for people who might know a bit about trains but they don't know much about narrow gauge, or especially a particular Maine narrow gauge history. It's something that we're very excited and honestly humbled to get to share with everybody who kind of comes on by.
Its location is certainly really convenient in a number of ways in that regard. And so, yeah, the sort of stumbling across the sidewalk element is very nifty. I'm curious as to how the organization came into existence. Griffin, maybe you could fill us in more on that.
Sure. Well, for those who may not know, the 2-foot narrow gauge is particularly unique to the state of Maine. They ran here as common carriers, passengers and freight connecting small towns with standard gauge railroads and on to the rest of the country. So when a lot of these railroads started going out of business in the early 1940s, a lot of the equipment went to Edaville in Carver, Massachusetts, which was started by a gentleman, LSD Atwood, EDA, Edaville, and off it went. They ran down there until the early 90s quite successfully, and very quickly turned his cranberry farm into kind of a railroad getaway, I guess you could say. And in 1992, when the Edaville started to, I guess you could say, dissolve or move into the next phase of its time, some people started to approach Edaville and say that they really like this 2-foot narrow gauge equipment, and could they buy this piece or that piece and whatnot. As I understand from talking with the owner at the time, George Bartholomew, he didn't want to separate the equipment from each other. So he told a group from Maine that if you start something like a trust or a nonprofit, then maybe we can talk about it. Well, they came back to him with Maine Narrow Gauge, a nonprofit organization, and they made a deal. So a lot of the equipment that was at Edaville then got moved back up to Maine and started operating here. It's really interesting because I think it's such a great story, because a lot of the trucks that brought the equipment from Maine to Massachusetts in the 40s were then, in 50s, I believe also, were then involved in bringing the equipment back to Maine in the early 90s. I'm sure we've all kind of seen the YouTube clips, and it's so great to see the story come full circle in that way. From there, they started running, I guess you'd say, like propaganda runs, if you would, where they would take these panel tracks right down Commercial Street, which is this waterfront, very center of the city place, to build hype around the railroad coming back to Portland. They had marching bands and big festivals and the whole thing. It was very exciting. And then they secured the right-of-way that we now operate on right along Portland's waterfront. Since then, the organization has continued to build year over year. Originally started off as just kind of running when the volunteers happen to have been around, and started evolving until now, where we run 7 days a week, at least 7 trips every day, and have about 70,000 riders a year. So very proud to see how far the organization's come in the 30-year history that it's been here in Portland.
And that it's incredible how much has transpired within that 30 years, including being able to have this waterfront line. Matt, what is the history of the right of way that you use in Portland?
Sure. So I guess one thing that is very interesting about the history of our line is that it's not too often you see kind of one stretch of tracks that has begun as one particular gauge and been progressively turned narrower and narrower. So the tracks that we run on historically were laid by the St. Lawrence and Atlantic Railroad. I believe construction started in July 4th of 1846. The line was built as a connection between Portland and Montreal. The idea being that Portland was the furthest north deepwater port that did not freeze during the winter. So for the St. Lawrence and Atlantic, which later became the Grand Trunk, which was operated out of Canada, Portland was the best choice for international shipping year round, even when the port of Montreal would freeze over. Portland was also, just by its location, a full day's sail closer to England at the time. So the railroad placed a lot of emphasis on building this line between Montreal and Portland. So it was built in 1846 to 1848. It opened as broad gauge at the time, 5 feet 6 inches. It was later incorporated into the Grand Trunk Railway in 1853. The Grand Trunk operated passenger freight trains between Portland and Montreal and all points in between. Starting about 1920s, they got merged into the Canadian National, continued running trains until daily service stopped in about, I believe, 1960 or so. From about the 1960s to the early 80s, service into downtown Portland was starting to dry up considerably. And then there's one particular bridge in Portland that the railroad needed to cross in order to access the downtown area. And this one particular bridge burnt down overnight in winter of 1984. I believe it was in the middle of the night in February of that year. And at the time, the Grand Trunk / Canadian National felt that they'd been losing enough business in downtown that it just was not worth it to them to rebuild the bridge and keep that line open. So they abandoned that 1.5 mile stretch of track going from the edge of the Portland Peninsula into the downtown area and took the rails out and put them into storage. And then the area sat kind of dormant for a few years. And then, as Griffin talked about a little bit earlier, when Maine narrow gauge was incorporated as an operating entity in the very early 90s, they got a hold to be able to use that right of way in downtown, and actually in almost every case possible, put the exact same rails back in the exact same spot, just with the rails now spaced 24 inches apart instead of the standard gauge 4 feet 8.5 inches. So it's a really, really unique story of, I guess, decline and comeback of this one railroad kind of operating under all these different guises and gauges over the years. But even to this day, we still kind of honor that traditional legacy. Historically, when the railroad would leave Portland, they would go west to Montreal. So when every one of our trains departs Portland, our conductors give clearance for the train to depart west to the end of our line. Even though geographically on the map it would be east, by railroad heritage, we still honor that and call it west to the end of the line or east back to the station.
Which, yeah, it is the chunk of railroad that you have now is primarily horizontal by the map. So that must be confusing for new people that come in onto your crew going, wait, but I'm going that way, but I'm referring to it as the other direction. Griffin, what are some of the notable pieces of equipment in the collection?
Well, I think it's a pretty good collection here, Maine narrow gauge. Of course, everybody's favorite is the 4 original steam locomotives we have. 2 are currently operating, and the other 2 are awaiting restoration and further work. We also have a number of diesel and gas locomotives, but in my opinion, the rarest and most interesting piece is the Rangeley parlor car, the only 2-foot narrow gauge parlor car that was ever built, and that was done by Jackson Sharp in Delaware, Pennsylvania. Wilmington, Delaware. And it really is, to me, quite incredible. Unlike any other car, the ornate detail and hand carving that goes into it. We have an additional 7 historic coaches that operate routinely, 4 replica coaches, 3 open air excursion cars, 3 original historic cabooses, an additional 7 historic freight cars, including a tank car, a flanger, a snowplow, a Model A rail bus that was used in the late 30s when the 2-footers started to decline as they tried to downsize train crews from 2 or 3 people down to 1. This rail bus was used. And then we have a Model T car that was used by the president of Sandy River Rangeley Lakes. Of course, like any good railroad museum, we have our obligatory speeder and pump car as well. But perhaps a little bit more unique when it's so narrow. So another neat thing in the collection.
Now I want to turn the spotlight to you guys and get to learn a little bit more about your roles at the organization, starting with you, Elizabeth.
So my current role at the organization is as the development specialist, which I feel that title may not entirely encompass what I do, but my 3 priorities are grant writing and fundraising, volunteer recruitment and engagement, and then community engagement as well. So I originally started with the Maine Narrow Gauge in 2019 solely as the volunteer coordinator. And then under Griffin wanted to expand my role a little bit and was very fortunate to be given that opportunity.
Excellent. How about you, Matt?
Sure. So I'm the general manager. I oversee kind of the day-to-day running of the organization and handle a lot of the business side and administrative side of what we do. And I also have a pretty heavy hand in our marketing and public relations efforts, special event planning, and kind of just overall logistics, both large and small.
Excellent. And Griffin?
I'm the executive director here, Maine Narrow Gauge. I started in 2011 when I was an early teenager. Really got involved, hoping to help out with the Engine 7 restoration. And as a junior volunteer, you start washing windows and mopping floors and work your way up. Eventually volunteered through all the different operation roles from track work and conductor, brakeman, up until eventually becoming a fireman and an engineer on the steam locomotive. In 2019, I got hired full-time as the finance and business manager, since had served as a board member, and then almost 2 years ago now started as the executive director.
Your central location with Portland, I can imagine that there's a number of advantages and disadvantages to that. Matt, what would you say are both the positives and the challenges in your relationship with the city, and how does that impact your organization?
Sure, and that's a very good question. So I think we're very lucky, and kind of talked about very earlier, pretty unusual to be a fully operational railroad right in the heart of a downtown urban environment. So for that, we're very lucky that we're kind of in this beautiful setting. Portland itself, if you haven't been, is a very beautiful city with just kind of stunning coastline views. And our railroad is pretty well placed to take full advantage of Casco Bay and the islands that you can see, and some of the lighthouses and old forts out in the distance. And there's a lot of history and a lot of pride in Portland for kind of what the city has been historically and kind of what the city is becoming. It's a very fun place, I think, to live and visit. The city is going through a pretty tremendous growth phase right now, which is bringing in a lot of just wonderful talent and ideas to the area. So I think it's a really fun place to visit, I think, and live. And also it helps kind of funnel people who into our railroad who might otherwise not have much of an interest in trains, or might not go very much out of their way to go on a train ride like ours. But because of our physical placement, and kind of just by the virtue of being in Maine and being this historic place of business in this pretty historic city, it helps us out quite tremendously with attracting passengers and attracting interest and volunteers. Some of the challenges have to do with, I guess, some of the other side of that physical location is that we operate next to the ocean front. We are there 24/7, 365 days a year. Even if the train's not running, our equipment is still stored next to the water and outdoors. So I think kind of dealing with some of those environmental impacts on our collection, especially when we have such a range of antique equipment, does require, I think, pretty good planning and strategy to make sure that we stay on top of our maintenance and repair issues that might arise. And I think another issue is just the fact that we love operating so close to the public and letting people see the train all day long. I mean, I work on the train as engineer or conductor, usually at least a couple of days a week. And, it's just fantastic to be on the train and see people just smiling and waving and taking photos of the train all day, every day. But the other side of that is there's kind of unfettered public access to our right of way, which can be challenging when people who might have different ideas about how to safely conduct themselves as the train is going by, try to get a little too close for comfort as the train's going by, or try to check out the train and equipment after hours, or be in a place we're not really supposed to be. So working with the public is great for introducing and showcasing our love of what we do, but it also presents some challenges of, I guess, having to operate safely and consistently at the same time. We have a very good working relationship with the city of Portland. We work pretty close with them on some of our special events, especially the Polar Express, which a lot of people know us for. We bring about 70,000 riders into Portland every year, and we're always looking for ways to kind of work closer with the city to let the folks who are making decisions know that we are a viable, attractive business and tourist opportunity along the waterfront. And we're always looking for ways to further collaborate and share ideas for our mutual success.
In that spirit of collaboration, Elizabeth, you mentioned that part of your work is with the community. What are some ways in which you are working to continue to foster that relationship?
For sure. In the past year, we have really shifted some of our focus into collaborating not only with local government entities, but as well with nonprofits. I'm very passionate about nonprofits and volunteerism in the state of Maine. That is my background. I came to this knowing nothing about trains, which I love to remind Griffin about. So I've always been looking for ways where we can collaborate with other organizations. One of our big projects this year was based on our location. We actually have a lot of invasive plants along our right-of-way, which, we're all about Maine history at Maine Narrow Gauge. So having these invasive plants that are harmful to the environment and ecosystem, obviously we saw that as kind of a detriment to the work that we're doing. So we formed a relationship with the Portland Parks Conservancy and have had a few days where they bring out volunteer groups to our right-of-way to remove these invasive plants, which some of them are beautiful, but again, ruining the local Maine ecosystem. Some of the other, collaborative works we've been doing with nonprofits, we're actually planning to work with the Maine Children's Museum in a few weeks here. We're doing an All About Trains Day at their facility, which they're the biggest attraction for folks with young children in the area. And as we are also an attraction for folks with young children in the area, we just always felt that that was a natural collaboration. So we'll be having an All About Trains Day where there'll be a train themed craft, a story time. We'll have conductors and engineers there, so kids can ask questions about trains. And we're really just hoping to expand that partnership into the future as well.
The Strasburg Railroad is an institution in the heritage railroad industry, and its mechanical services department is proud to lead the way. With the knowledge and experience that has created one of the most reliable steam railroading experiences in the country, the Strasburg Railroad is excited to offer their expertise to the rest of the industry. Strasburg's professional team provides consulting and technical assistance to take your steam locomotive or railcar project from idea to finished product. They stand behind their work and always strive to meet their customers' needs for quality, historic accuracy, and reliability at a price that is fair. Unlike many competitors, they feature a fully equipped boiler, railcar, and machine shop, so the work gets done in-house, helping you to get more for your money. Send your inquiries to mechanical@strasburgrailroad.com and let the professionals get to work for you. Being that you guys, your infrastructure, your equipment, it's all 2-foot. That sort of lines yourselves up to naturally align with the other 2-foot organizations. We've had the fortune of talking to folks from the Wiscasset Water Rail and Farmington Railway on the show before, but I also understand that besides collaborating with them, you also work with Edaville Railroad in its modern incarnation. Griffin, how would you describe those relationships, and what are some of the specific ways in which you guys are helping each other out?
One of my favorite parts of what we do is those collaborations. WWNF, to me, is one of the neatest museums I've been to, because when you go there, it really is like a time capsule. I mean, you go there and you instantly feel like it's 1929. And I certainly always give a tip of the hat to Dave and Jason, who do such an incredible work up there with their team as well. In many ways, it has aspects that I wish we could also demonstrate in Portland. The steam engine 7 days a week, or for all their operations, rather. Excuse me. And just the historical accuracy that makes it a little difficult to duplicate in downtown Portland. And so to me, it really is truly an honor to see a lot of our equipment there being operated as it would have been originally in the 20s and 30s. And they're excellent with us as well, because they have tremendous knowledge about workmanship and craft and whatnot that goes into caring for and maintaining the equipment. And I think it works really well that we're able to share a lot of knowledge back and forth, or if the need arises, share supplies or communicate so easily. Being 1 hour apart, it is excellent, especially when the gauge is so unique. So that's a tremendous asset for us. Similarly, Edaville is kind of on the other side of the collaborations we work with, right? They have a theme park involved, but they also run the 2-foot narrow gauge equipment. They have an incredible welder and machinist there, Brian, who's a tremendous friend to us as well. So another valuable resource for knowledge sharing. We certainly have equipment go back and forth and around all the time. I think that's one of the biggest benefits to this equipment, is that it can so easily go on a tractor trailer and be transported within a day. So, for example, right now, we are running Edaville's diesel engine on our daily trains in Portland, and vice versa. When Edaville's running, they're running one of our steam locomotives, Monson number 3. On this call right now, actually, I'm down in Massachusetts, about to go meet with their leadership team as well. So it really is so excellent to see that it's not just a piece of paper and a binder. These collaborations are so actively involved in that nobody is a stranger at any of the operations. I'm a big fan of the phrase, "a rising tide lifts all boats." And I think in the world of railroad preservation, to be able to work with other people who are so knowledgeable and experienced, and bring that passion and enthusiasm to the public and share why they should be passionate too, really is truly an honor to me.
With all of this excitement that this equipment and this history generates, Philip Jago asks, how do you guys recruit volunteers? And what is the average age of your volunteers? Elizabeth, maybe you could talk to that point.
We recruit volunteers in a variety of ways. We have been leaning mostly on the internet, whether that's our own personal social media pages or specific volunteer recruitment websites. I'm personally a huge fan of Volunteer Match, which is just general, not specific to trains. We also have been very successful just in general, word of mouth. They had mentioned the walking trail right next to our right of way. We've had a lot of folks apply to volunteer who have literally said, I walked by your train and I want to be involved. So it's awesome that honestly, in some ways, the train is just recruiting for itself by being there, which we've talked about a little bit. When it comes to special events, that's one of my favorite things is to recruit volunteers for Polar Express or other special events throughout the year. And we've collaborated with a lot of local groups, specifically high schools, where we've gotten over the course of Polar Express, 250 to 300 volunteers just who are willing to help out with that production, which is amazing. I'm excited going into the, now that we're thinking about Polar Express, I'm excited going into the new year, really thinking about ways where we can change our volunteer recruitment strategies. I'd love to have some volunteer information sessions where people can come in and learn about our organization and really spend that, off season in the winter where we're closed, focusing on recruiting, onboarding, and training new volunteers who might be interested. When it comes to the age of our volunteers, I think it's very unique that we operate 7 days a week and our operating hours start at 9:30 and depending on the day can end at 7 or 8:30. So if folks are working or have families, there's really a ton of opportunity, again, 7 days a week where they could come in. So we actually have a really wide variety of age in our volunteers. There are some roles where folks do have to be 18 just due to our insurance liability. But the majority of our volunteers, again, honestly range from like 20s to folks who are retired who are interested in being involved a few days a week, which is really awesome.
Great to see that support. And yeah, I feel like you could put a banner on the side of the train that says, you too can be part of making the train run. and that
this engineer is a volunteer and this could be you.
Yes. Yeah, have an arrow and whatever coach is next to and a sign with an arrow pointing up at your engineer, be like, this could be you. Could have fun with that. Matt, when we were talking about the relationship with Portland, I remember the first time I visited your site back in the 90s. I remember going inside and being inside a building and being able to see some of your equipment on display in a building. And my understanding is that due to a lot of the waterfront development, that is what forced some of that equipment to be relocated. So what are the current initiatives for being able to display the equipment that isn't operating within Portland?
As you mentioned, we did used to have a full-scale museum on site that we did lose a couple of years ago due to some of the development along the waterfront. So losing that space was a pretty tough challenge for the organization. We were able at that time to work out a really wonderful collaboration with the Wiscasset, Waterville, and Farmington to temporarily house about half of our collection, including most of our steam engines and quite a few of our passenger and freight cars. It's still something that we are trying to figure out the best way to display the historic equipment in Portland. We are pretty landlocked for development. So it would be a bit of a challenge to build new storage tracks for display. Even something that we're still trying to work on is trying to figure out the best way that we can ensure the long-term care of our equipment for kind of more permanent weatherproof facilities. So kind of what we're trying to focus on instead, instead of trying to, I guess, grow the physical footprint of our operation, is trying to grow, I guess, the scale of everything else that we do besides the train ride itself, because there's just not a whole lot more we can physically add to the train in terms of length or distance or the ability to display equipment. So to that end, kind of as Griffin was talking about, we try to stay pretty active with sending equipment to or from Wiscasset and Alna to the operation up there. Last year is probably a pretty interesting moment as one of our steam locomotives came down the highway. I mean, how often do you really see a 1913 built locomotive traveling on the back of a flatbed in the backwoods of Maine or coming into downtown Portland? So we try to do things like that. We kind of send equipment, as Griffin said, to other railroads like Edaville or Wiscasset. We run open air cars in the train during the spring, summer, and fall, and we kind of switch those out with some of the more historic enclosed coaches in the fall and winter. So I guess in lieu of a physical space to display cars that we unfortunately just don't have the room for, we try to keep the interest going by introducing a variety of equipment to our railroad.
Griffin, I was at Wiscasset, Waterville, and Farmington in 2021 when the new fundraising initiative was announced to restore those 2 locomotives to operation. How are those efforts going so far?
Very well. I think, everybody loves a steam locomotive, so it's great to build excitement around those. And it really is interesting to see these 2 locomotives side by side. I think, Nick, you can certainly appreciate literally seeing them side by side. It is a little bit of kind of David and Goliath size comparison wise. And currently, I don't want to say too much too soon, but we are in talks with other organizations as well to see how we can build further partnerships and collaboration to perform work on these steam locomotives and get them operating and out to the public. I don't think anybody likes seeing an equipment, I don't think anybody likes seeing a steam locomotive sitting around. As we all say, the best way to preserve these is to operate them, put them in front of the public and generate that interest and keep it moving forward. As well as that's the best representation of our mission statement, which is to preserve and operate the historic 2-foot narrow gauge equipment for the education and enjoyment of the public. I think one of the interesting things that we're up to as well, that on that note, I'd like to call a little bit of attention to, is our coach building efforts that we have. In the past 2 years, our shop crew has rebuilt, it will be 3 cars this winter, which is, to me, really incredible. When I talk about that, we have wood coaches. The only metal that is involved is the trucks and the end platforms. Otherwise, they're wood frame and wood ceiling and have studs somewhat comparably to a house, right? So the level of detail and craftsmanship that goes into these cars is unbelievable. They always make me feel a little bad if I'll sit in my office and do something in the budget and all I see out the window is all this work happening, which is great and certainly makes me miss having a hand in it. But it's great to see. And I think a big part of that too is that generates a lot of interest with folks who perhaps may not have gotten involved in the train directly. Over the past year, we've been starting to partner with local trade schools or Voc centers. Or I don't know what your region may call them specifically, but this last winter we had an intern in learning the art of woodworking and fine craftsmanship from our master carpenter. And the efforts that they put in is, to me, absolutely unbelievable. I mean, you get in these coaches that they have built, and it feels like you are in the Rangeley or the Pondicherry, these other historic cars that were built in the late 1800s. And to that end, it's it's great to see in our shop they implement anything from the technologies that were used originally in building these cars up to the very latest of we have a CNC machine in our shop that will literally scan original moldings or wood panels and duplicate them. So it's very exciting that when you climb aboard a train at Maine Narrow Gauge, it helps create that feeling of authenticity and kind of, in a sense, reliving that history as best you possibly can in downtown Portland.
This episode of the Roundhouse is brought to you by Rail and Road Auctions. You can find all types of railroad collectibles, including signs, signals, horns, locks, keys, lanterns, timetables, passes, and more. With opening bids of only $10 on many lots, you'll be sure to find something to add to your collection or train room. Rail and Road also offers fast and easy shipping right to your doorstep, and they combine multiple live and online sales methods to allow you a variety of purchasing options. Now, they have an app for both Apple and Android devices that allows for pre-bidding and live bidding on auction days. Their next auction is on June 15th and 16th, 2023, and you can view the full catalog now at www.bidrar.com. That's bidrar.com. Rail and Road Auctions, where real railroaders and rail fans build their collection. Walter Butler was wondering if Maine Narrow Gauge has any plans for a 100th birthday for Bridgeton and Sako River number 8, one of the 4 steam locomotives you own, as it will be turning 100 in March of next year. Matt, any plans on that particular front?
So it's kind of as Griffin talked about, we're trying to figure out that what we can do to best honor the heritage of this locomotive, and figure out what we can do to really preserve this really special piece of Maine 2-foot steam railroading history. Again, it's not something I can really give too many details about at this time, but something that I think we'll be pretty excited to share as plans develop. And I'd encourage anybody listening, if this is a subject that interests you, please stay tuned to our website at mainnarrowgauge.org and our social media as those plans start to come to fruition. I don't know if Griffin, if you have anything more to add on that topic.
Looking toward the future, Matt and Elizabeth, what are some events that you're particularly excited about that are upcoming?
So it's because it's kind of top of my mind right now. Maine Narrow Gauge operates a Polar Express train ride during the holidays in November and December. It's our biggest fundraising event every year, and it's a bit of a mega production that we just love putting on. We have one of the steam trains out for it, and we decorate the train to the very gills with all sorts of lights and trees on board. We put every possible Christmas decoration up over the station area. Come on the train and it's playing music from the Polar Express movie. We have hot chocolate and cookies for everybody on board. The train goes out with all sorts of costume characters on board the train, interacting with guests. Kids get a golden ticket that gets punched by the conductor. The train goes out to the North Pole, and then Santa comes on the train at the North Pole and meets every passenger and gives every kid their first gift for Christmas, which is a silver sleigh bell. And it's a really, really fun event that every year brings in about 20 to 22, 23,000 riders. It's funny, kind of in my own travels around Portland, a lot of times, if I say I work for Maine Narrow Gauge, the very first reaction is, oh, that's the Polar Express, right? I think it really just introduces a whole lot of people to kind of the magic and thrill of railroading in the style that we do it. So that'll be coming up Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays during the holiday season, November 24th to December 23rd. Tickets for those who are able to come to Maine and experience our version of the Polar Express Tickets are at mainpolarexpress.com. Maine, like the state, Maine. So that's kind of the most well-known and I guess probably the biggest and highest produced of all of our events. But we do events all year round. This weekend for Labor Day weekend, we'll be wrapping up our seasonal ice cream trains and what we call the Sunset Express. For the ice cream train, this year we ran it every Friday night, usually around the time of a beautiful Casco Bay sunset. We'll run the train and everybody gets a free ice cream with their ticket. Similar for the Sunset Express, we run those on summer Saturday nights. Again, try to time it with the gorgeous sunset over the Calendar Islands in Casco Bay. Take a train ride and everybody gets a free drink with their ticket. We have beers and wines and cocktails for the adults and family-friendly options like fruit juices, waters, sodas for anybody who's interested. And then in the fall, we usually do a pumpkin train. That'll be the last 2 weekends in October where we run the train on just a beautiful, crisp autumn day. All kids who ride the train get to take home a free pumpkin with their ticket. We have a pumpkin patch that we set up near our station, and we have all sorts of activities inside, like face painting and pumpkin decorating and games and activities and a few fall-themed snacks and treats. So it'll be coming up in October. We do a few spring-themed events every year as well, especially kind of when we first open for the season. We like to do a spring aboard event just to kind of say it's the new operating season and everything's fresh and new and can't wait to have you on board the train. So they're kind of the train themed events that we have going on. I know Elizabeth's also working on some other programs and activities around the Portland area as well.
Another one of our focuses this year has, as we've talked about, we don't have a traditional museum space like we used to. So we've been kind of thinking about how can we take some of the programming we're doing in that space into other facilities in the community. So we've been collaborating a lot with local libraries to do train themed story times and crafts, really family friendly, having folks come in. So we're hoping to get a few more of those. We've had some throughout the summer, but a few more in the fall. And then thinking about next year, just hopefully growing our collaboration with the Maine Children's Museum, as well as some other organizations in the area that are focused on youth, including Boy Scouts of America and Girl Scouts as well, seeing how we can partner more with those organizations.
Last question I have for each of you guys is, at the end of the day, what do you enjoy most about being part of this organization? We'll start with you, Griffin.
I think the best part of being involved in the organization is having something to be so passionate about and care so deeply about. To be able to share that with other people as well, and to see them genuinely engage and kind of grow into it as well. In my opinion, that results in just being surrounded by such incredible people, from Matt and Elizabeth to the guys in our shop and the guys that help out with track work. There really is nothing better than being surrounded by people who are so passionate and care so much about this. Every day, I think that's just the most rewarding thing that anybody could hope for.
Elizabeth?
My favorite thing about the work that we do, I have a lot of favorite things. I love seeing our volunteers who are so passionate and dedicated showing up every day, every week, especially during Polar Express. It really is a team collaborative effort, and you can see that within our community, but as you also see that within the passengers who are coming, how passionate they are, bringing their kids, the parents being involved. It really is, I'm going to say heartwarming. It really is heartwarming. My other favorite thing is every day is different. You never know what to expect. So again, I don't have a background. I have a background in nonprofits and not in trains. And I am just always having a great time, no matter what day it is.
And Matt?
I would say, to me, what I truly love is seeing people on the train and seeing people who are on the walking trail that's next to the train, just looking at the train and smiling at it as it goes by. To me, it's such a special, unique kind of unexpected thing to really see in this busy urban environment. And I think just the smiles of delight from people who ride the train and come away learning about something that they never knew about, maybe never given 1 second of thought to, but now they've just spent 40 minutes kind of engrossed in this world that we've created, that we've done because it's something that we just truly love, that we want people to know about, and we feel it's important for them to know about. Or kind of just the average passerby who doesn't know the first thing about us or the train, but just sees something that is remarkable and unusual and catches their attention. And whether or not it might be a toddler who's seeing the train and waving to it almost out of instinct, or might be somebody who has worked on trains for 70 years of their life and they see it go by and it still kind of catches them by surprise and they're just so happy to see it. To me, it's just a really very special thing that kind of brings people together. And we do it because something that we just enjoy doing, and we think it's a lot of fun and very interesting. And we hope that people who know us or don't know us or take the train or just see it going by come away with that exact same feeling, that it's just a thing that's truly remarkable and unlike anything else that they'll really see in their daily lives. So it's a very special, magical thing to be part of.
Their website is mainenarrowgauge.org, Maine as in the state with an E, and you can see their upcoming trips and events from there. Guys, thank you so much for joining us here on the Roundhouse to share the work that your organization is doing. It's really incredible to see the collection that you have. I was reading the book, The Maine Two-Footers by Linwood Moody, and there's a really nice photo in that book of the Rangeley parlor car that you mentioned. And to be able to see that car in existence today, look pretty much identical to the photograph, is neat. And so that preservation work combined with all your other initiatives, it's very interesting to hear about. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having us on.
And now, the question of the day.
Last time on the Roundhouse, we were talking to Rob Gardner, president of American Steam Railroad Preservation Association, about their restoration of Reading 2100, which led to the question, what steam locomotive restoration are you most excited about? There were a ton of responses. I appreciated seeing what your enthusiasm was towards, and I could only pick a few comments here, but I always enjoy reading your thoughts overall. From the roundhousepodcast.com, Nathan Jones writes, I'm most looking forward to the restoration of Union Pacific 3985 and 5511 by Railroading Heritage of Midwest America. I never saw it in its original excursion service, but always thought 3985 was a very cool locomotive. 5511 will be very neat to see run with its unique Young valve gear mechanism. That Railroading Heritage of Midwest America, it seems like they have a lot going on. Definitely something that we'll be keeping an eye on for sure. From Facebook, Doug Davenport writes, the one still in progress I think I'm most excited about is Pennsylvania Railroad number 1361. My grandfather was a PRR employee and he always loved a K4. Looking forward to seeing what he was so excited about. I agree, Doug. That is one that I'm particularly looking forward to as a Pennsylvania native. It's going to be so nice to see the state steam locomotive back in operation. Jacob A. Wolfel, sorry if I got your name wrong there, Jacob, writes, 2 engines, Chicago Northwestern's number 1385 and 175, especially considering the amount of work being done on 1385, will have it better than factory new with what they are doing with it. When both are done, that means half the surviving CNW steam locomotives are restored to operation. That's an interesting accomplishment. Good point, Jacob. And lastly, from Jonathan David Patton, Arcade in Attica number 18 for sure. I remember riding behind number 18 as a young boy, and I worked as a conductor on the excursion trains for a few summers before I moved away. From what I've seen, she will be in the best shape she's been in for a long time, maybe even since new. I agree, Jonathan. I have a strong feeling of nostalgia towards number 18. I last saw it in operation in 2012. That's a nice consolidation. Good to see it back in operation, hopefully soon. Your question of the day for this episode is, what piece of narrow gauge railroad history do you enjoy most? Let me know on the roundhousepodcast.com. Links to social media are there. Thank you guys for tuning into the Roundhouse. It's great to have you along for the journey and to see where we get to explore when it comes to the fascinating world of trains and railroading. Remember, as always, that the Roundhouse is our house.